Welcome to Sports Sunday. I'm Brooke Grimsley. The All-Star break is over, and this weekend, the Cardinals started the all-important second half of the season, picking up where they left off, facing the Reds. This time, though, it was in Cincinnati. The Redbirds going for the series win today. Bottom of the third here. Reds already up by 1. Joey Votto continues his good weekend versus the Cards. That's a goner. 3-run shot makes it 4-0 Reds. Top of the fourth with one swing of the bat. Goldie cuts that deficit in half. That is a goner as well. 2-run shot makes it 4-2 Reds. Bottom of the fourth, runners on the corners for Tyler Naquin. Base hit into center. A run will score. It's 5-2. Bottom of the fifth, 6-2 Reds. Miles Mikolas with the strikeout of former Cardinal Tommy Pham. His day is done after. 7 hits, 6 earned runs, and 2 walks with 4 strikeouts in 5 innings of work today. Top of the 6th, Goldie once again. He was a one-man show today, drove in all the team's runs. That is a goner solo shot. That would be as close as it would get for the Cardinals. 6-3, your final score. The Redbirds drop the series to the Reds, and the Cards are off to Toronto on Tuesday. Well, speaking of which, the Cardinals will be without 2 of their all-stars for the 2-game series against the Blue Jays in Toronto, Nolan Arenado and Paul Goldschmidt. This is due to the country's COVID vaccination mandates. This morning, Cardinals President of Baseball Operations John Mozeliak addressing the decision of Arenado and Goldie not getting vaccinated for COVID.
In terms of sacrificing for the team, I think these are all personal decisions, and for anybody that pays attention to the news or what's happening in our country, a lot of these issues can be quite polarizing. And what I'm hoping to do is avoid that polarization with our club or inside the clubhouse, because look, we all have strong opinions on what we think the right answer should be, but I think we also all understand that it's hard to convince people to do something that they're not comfortable doing. I don't think it's in anybody's best interest to try to pass judgment or try to make this more than what it is. They're not available, and we're going to have to go play the game.
A lot of news surrounding the Cardinals coming out of the All-Star break and starting the second half of the season. To break this down even more, we bring in now Cardinals beat writer for our website, KMOV.com, Brendan Schaefer. Brendan, let's just first start with your thoughts on today's game. The Cardinals dropping 2 of 3 in Cincinnati. Not exactly what you want to see from the Redbirds coming out of the All-Star break, right?
Yeah, that's not where they thought they were going to start out, taking on a Cincinnati team that's toward the bottom of the National League Central standings. And they weren't able to get the series win this weekend. Not a great start from Adam Wainwright on Friday. And then Miles Mikolas gets taken deep by Joey Votto. Doesn't have the game that he wanted. 6 earned runs for really what's been the Cardinals' best pitcher on the season. You like seeing Paul Goldschmidt able to just do what he always seems to do offensively with a couple of home runs in this game. But that's the Cincinnati Reds. It's not like you're playing a contending team, and that's where you need to be able to pile up wins. Instead, the Cardinals lose the series. Meanwhile, the Brewers swept the Rockies. So you did lose ground in the division, unfortunately, over the weekend.
Now, Brendan, let's jump into the biggest news of the day. The Cardinals will be without 2 of their all-stars, Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado, as they head to Toronto. Also, catcher Austin Romine won't be going with them either. The 3 were added to the restricted list because they are unvaccinated for COVID-19 and they can't cross the border due to COVID restrictions. How big of a loss is this for the Cardinals?
The good news for the Cardinals is that it's only 2 games in Toronto that they're going to be missing these players. But you think about other teams around the league. The Kansas City Royals recently had this issue where 10 of their players were unable. So it's good for the Cardinals that there's only 3. The problem is it's 2 of your best hitters and 2 of your all-stars. Paul Goldschmidt has been producing at just ridiculous levels recently. 5 home runs in the last 4 games, dating back to even before the All-Star break. He's been a man on a mission and playing like the MVP of the league. Cardinals need every game they can get right now, and it's definitely a competitive disadvantage for the team not to have Goldschmidt the way he's playing and not to have Arenado, not only because of his offense, which has been very good for the season, but his defense as well. Cardinals have to hope they can come up with at least 1 win in Toronto so that this story doesn't look as bad as it kind of does right now.
As you kind of just touched on there, how do you think that this could come back and affect the Cardinals later on this season?
Hopefully the effects of it will end here this week. I guess in theory, the Cardinals could play Toronto in the World Series, and then you'd have that as an issue moving forward. But otherwise, it's literally just these 2 games, and the Cardinals don't have to worry about this again. You could wonder whether it has an impact on the clubhouse and team camaraderie. These are two team leaders, but I think the Cardinals and the guys in that clubhouse, they understand that Arenado and Goldschmidt are as dedicated as anyone, and this is just a different situation that nobody wishes they had to be dealing with this season. And so I don't question that the teammates, I'm sure there might be some disappointment in that room. That would be fair to have, but I don't question that the teammates are still going to have these guys' backs whenever they're able to return.
And in the midst of all this, really tough news coming out for Steven Matz today. He made his return to the mound last night, coming back from injury. He got the win, but also he got injured in the process. The Cardinals revealing today that he has torn his MCL. We aren't sure if it will end his season or not. He will at least miss several weeks. How hard is this for Matz, and what will this mean for the Cardinals starting rotation moving forward?
This is a big blow. I know Steven Matz hadn't performed the way the Cardinals had expected when they signed him to the contract before the season. He's been dealing with injuries, and the performance hadn't been there either. But he did look really good over the weekend in Cincinnati. Was the only Cardinals starter to get a win in that series. So it's unfortunate that you see him go down with the injury there. The fact that it is an MCL means you're going to be without him for some period of time, whether it requires surgery or not. This is something the Cardinals are going to have to be aware of. I know that Ollie Marmol said today they can probably get by with a 4-man rotation with Dakota Hudson returning to the fold pretty soon after he did a rehab start in Memphis today. But eventually the Cardinals are going to need more starting pitching help. And so I think that's up to John Mozeliak to look for ahead of the trade deadline on August 2nd. He's got to find a way to maybe boost that group in some form or fashion.
Well, and of course, the other big news surrounding the Cardinals lately is the possibility of the Redbirds landing Juan Soto. The New York Post even reporting today that the Redbirds are a front runner to land him, and everyone was analyzing how Albert Pujols was interacting with Soto at the Home Run Derby. But Soto, who's described as a generational player, will of course come at a big price. What do you think that trade package would look like, and is this something that the Cardinals should do?
Well, I think part of it could depend on the pitcher. Patrick Corbin, he's a guy with the Nationals who hasn't been pitching very well, and he's got a big contract. So the Nationals reportedly want to include him in a trade to get rid of that bad money when they send away Juan Soto. If they do indeed decide to do that, that's a benefit to the Cardinals because they would maybe have to give up some prospects, but not as many of them to get the superstar slugger Juan Soto, who's only 23 years old. He would be under contract for 2 more seasons after this one. That's 3 Octobers that you would get to enjoy the benefits of Juan Soto in the middle of your batting order. I think if Patrick Corbin would be involved in the trade, that could make the Cardinals potential suitors. All you'd have to do is pay his money. I know it wouldn't be enjoyable for a pitcher that hasn't lived up to the contract, but Juan Soto would live up to everything you'd be paying him and then some. So I don't know that it's likely to happen, but it's something the Cardinals should be interested in because they have the pieces to make it happen.
If you could, just put a percentage on it of what you think maybe the likelihood is of the Cardinals landing Soto.
You know, I would have probably said a week ago more like 1%. Seems like really unlikely. But the more smoke that seems to be added, maybe there is some fire to this. I don't doubt that the Cardinals have checked in on it, but it really is going to come down to the Nationals being reasonable with what they demand in a trade. You remember the Arenado trade with the Rockies? Eventually, Colorado realized, we owe this guy a lot of money. If we don't want to pay him all of that money, we're not going to be able to get a bunch of premium prospects back. The Cardinals gave him some decent players like Austin Gomber, but they didn't give them any real top prospects. If the Nationals eventually recognize that they're in a similar boat right now because of the addition of Patrick Corbin and the $60 million they owe him, and it's pretty much dead money at this point, that could be a situation where John Mozeliak can step in and say, hey guys, we've got the solution for you. Send Juan Soto over to here, send Corbin over to here, and we'll take care of that money, no problem. That would also be something, though, that Bill DeWitt would have a say in because he is part of ownership and would get to dictate if they're going to raise payroll. That's something they'll have to answer for as well if they're going to make this kind of trade.
It was great hearing from Brendan. We'll have much more coming up on Sports Sunday. A St. Louis baseball star turned NASA scientist turns 102 years old. We'll get to know Nate Crump after the break.